What the frack is going on here? Let's ask Thomas Catenacci about that. He'll give us some details. He's from the Washington Free Beacon. Thomas, good to talk to you as always, sir.
Yes, great to be here.
All right, so 2019, she's like, yeah, I'm for banning fracking. In 2020, she popped up in a vice presidential debate, and she said, well, Joe Biden's not for banning fracking. That's what she's referencing there. And now she says, oh, no, I'm not for banning fracking at all. Is there any consistency here that you can point to?
Absolutely not. The only consistency really is just flip-flopping and trying to find how she can win an election, which, ironically, she doesn't do a very good job of doing, historically speaking. But, you know, I just want to kind of underscore the point. There is no doubt in my mind that she supports banning fracking. And you just follow her entire career. As you mentioned those comments, you know, she also did work trying to restrict fracking, ultimately try to ban it in California when she was Attorney General, even going after the Obama administration. And then she you know, states last night that somehow she supports oil and gas leasing, or what she called fracking leasing. It's like the stats show the complete opposite, Vince. And, you know, we can talk about data, but the bottom line is the Biden-Harris administration has leased the lowest amount of acreage of public lands compared to any administration stretching back decades. That's both Democrat and Republican. And so they tried to put forward a leasing moratorium. They failed, and instead they decided to just not follow the law and sort of indirectly pursue that moratorium.
So you know, she was a backer, a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. She's been, you know, every step of the way when you get the radical left's kind of climate lobby, their green energy lobby. She's been supportive of all those efforts, and that includes banning fracking, right?
Absolutely. The Green New Deal, she was one of the original co-sponsors on. And the Green New Deal, of course, is, according to some of the more modest projections, a $70 trillion bill that would include things like banning fracking, banning all new oil and gas leasing, and putting forward mandates like electric vehicle mandates that consist of these very abrupt electrification mandates for the American people. And I think that, you know, what they're really doing here is trying to hide her own views from the public in this final few months before the election. And it just strikes me as very dishonest. I think if the average American and the average voter in Pennsylvania, of course, heard what she actually believes, and the campaign knows this, then there's no doubt that they would vote the other way. Because it's not just, you know, liberal as we would say, but it's very, very far left, progressive, and radical even, what she truly believes.
So there's also one of the practical realities of politics, unfortunately, is the corruption of it. When Kamala Harris took over for Joe Biden as the nominee, Semaphore ran a story saying dropping out may be the best thing Biden ever did on climate. And then they said U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's move to the top of the Democratic presidential ticket is driving a surge in fundraising from climate-focused voters who were less eager to open their wallets for President Joe Biden. Then they tick down the list, and they're talking about all the leading, quote, green groups and all of the big ticket donors who are now pouring money into her coffers. They're not doing this because she's going to work against them, are they?
No, absolutely not. And you know for sure, and I've reported a little bit on this issue too. I've done a few stories about sort of these conversations that are happening behind the scenes with green groups, and I got a hold of a fundraising call that was private among some of the big groups like League of Conservation Voters and some activists like Bill McKibben. And they're all essentially what they're saying is she is going to be the most green president we'll be able to have at this point in history. And we're just going to support her as she sort of pretends and does this sort of dance with the media of,
yes,
you know, I no longer support this, and I voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. We're getting it done. It's this whole sort of weird dance when they know in reality she'll come in there, and on day one you will start seeing electric vehicle mandates. You will start seeing some of the harshest restrictions on oil and gas leasing, things that will really impact people and their wallets and at the gas pump.
In fact, there's another piece here, Politico. They say, quote, "We don't want to sabotage her. Why green groups are going easy on Harris." In other words, they're keeping their powder dry right now because they know she just has to do this song and dance in order to get in, and then boom, they're going to move, as you point out.
Yeah, and they're not just endorsing her. They really are, and you mentioned this earlier, putting their money behind her. Tens of millions of dollars in ad campaigns. Some of these the most powerful green groups, League of Conservation Voters, Climate Power, dark money groups like those. So they're really putting and it really underscores that point. They wouldn't be doing this so aggressively, spending more money than they ever have if they didn't believe she would pursue these policies.
So let me just go back to the fracking for a moment. Let's pretend that this this was a serious policy dispute. My understanding of fracking, if you're a believer of the left's climate orthodoxy, if you're all in on man-made climate change and we've got to stop it, all of this, the reality is that fracking has been the single biggest limiter of CO2 emissions that we've ever had. Fracking is responsible for massive drop-offs of carbon emissions, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, Vince, you read my mind. I was hoping you would ask that question because, this is a popular tangent of mine. Over the last 15 years, I have the stats right in front of me. The U.S. has reduced carbon emissions more than any other country in the world, and has reduced emissions by 879 million metric tons. That's a 14% decrease. And it's exactly why you just said, or how you just described it, which is because of fracking, because of more reliance on natural gas for power generation across the nation, we're reducing emissions. And so you would think, right, that climate activists would be very happy about this, say more fracking, more natural gas production. Like let's kind of find the middle ground here where we can all rally together for lower prices. But instead, it's actually the opposite. They're very upset that they see here that fossil fuels and continued fossil fuel production can lead to these sorts of emissions reductions that they never would have thought was possible, just 15 years ago. And so it kind of gets to that sneaky thing where what do they really want here?
Yes.
Is it lower emissions, or is it sort of control? Is it mandates, top-down government power? And so that's kind of where my reporting leads me, is I find that conversation very interesting.
Right.
They're getting the results. Why aren't they happy?
Because that's not actually the end goal, as you're wisely pointing out. The end goal isn't a decrease in carbon emissions or anything like that. If it was, they would be aggressively promoting nuclear energy. They're not doing that. And so the reason is the typical sort of corruption. They sell you the scare tactic. They say the only answer is to concentrate more power in Washington and to give money to the organizations that are associated with this movement. That's it. And it's fundamentally just a corrupt industry that doesn't actually have any true idealistic or noble goals.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out a few more data points for you and for your audience that I think are really important. The Department of Energy in 2021 put out a report about a fracking ban, and they found that it would lead to a 244% increase in natural gas prices, kill 7.7 million jobs, and reduce the U.S. GDP by 1.1 trillion. I mean, those are just insane numbers.
Well, if we banned fracking, where would we get energy from if we banned fracking?
Yeah, just pixie dust and magic, I guess.
But assuming we turn to traditional, assuming we turn to traditional means, burning coal or something, they're going to lift carbon emissions. Banning fracking would increase carbon emissions.
Yeah, absolutely, and it would increase prices as well. And there's often been a theory, and I think that there's quite a bit of evidence supporting it, that the left really wants prices from traditional power to go up, such as coal. And then they can really push the narrative that green energy will save everything. But it's very hard to do that, Vince, when emissions are going down, prices are low with fossil fuel production. How are they ever going to convince the average American to, support the sort of policies that they want and the policies that will lead to tons of money flowing to their friends in the green energy movement.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you don't have your eyes open to this scam by now, I don't know what it's going to take. But Kamala Harris right now trying to pretend like she's Madam American Energy. She's not. She's working against it. And look no further than the billions, the donors who are just pouring in right now to get her across the finish line in a very short window. Thomas Catenacci is with the Washington Free Beacon. He's been a great reporter on this issue for years. Tom Cat, great to talk to you as always, sir.